Paul certainly tried to take the early Christian movement away from the Jewish people, and he did that quite successfully. He is, no doubt, the person who really shaped Christianity, invented proto-Orthodoxy, and unfortunately brought avodah zarah, brought idolatry to the world.
Joseph, you're live on the air. Go right ahead with your question, sir.
Okay, so my question is, this morning, is about Paul. So I'm going to lay out a few of the things leading up to it, but basically, the question is, was he just a false apostle? Because, like, in Revelation, it talks about, say they're Jews and are not, and it also mentions apostles. It also mentions people that teach meat, that you can eat meat, that there is someone teaching that you can eat meat sacrificed to idols, and it mentions this person in a very bad way in Revelation. Is this possibly talking about Paul? And then what gave him his authority to be an apostle in the first place? Because they had already appointed a replacement for Judas, and when they did that, they stated that the person had to be with them from the beginning of the ministry of Jesus.
I'm not a fan of Paul, and I'd like to think that this person, John of Patmos, whoever that was thinking about Paul. I don't think so. What we find in both Revelation chapter 2, verse 9 and 3, verse 9, referring to people who are thought to be Jews but are not Jews, and their synagogue is synagogue of Satan, is really just a very anti-Jewish remark. I think that when Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 8 permits the eating of meat that was offered to idols, which is forbidden. Let's say at some place where they have idol worship and an animal is sacrificed to an idol, a non-Jew is not allowed to eat it. It's forbidden, even by the standards of Acts 15. In Acts 15, there was a conflict over non-Jews who wanted to be Christians if they first had to convert to Judaism. But it was resolved, among many other things, that they were not allowed to eat of the meat offered to idols. However, we see in 1 Corinthians, beginning in chapter 8, that when Paul is asked that question, he doesn't know a thing about Acts 15. Of course, Acts 15 hadn't been written yet. There's so many differences between Acts and Paul's own letters, but I don't think that's what the book of Revelation had in mind. And you're also quite right that in Colossians chapter 2, verse 16 and 17, Paul permits the eating of non-kosher food. Again, I don't think the author of the book of Revelation had Paul in mind. The book of Revelation is a very, very, very different kind of book than the other 26 books of the Christian Bible. It's fiercely anti-Roman in that Paul, it is claimed in the book of Acts. Paul doesn't make this claim, but it's made explicitly in the book of Acts that Paul was a citizen of the Roman Empire. Could that have played a role? I don't think there's a connection. It might be. It's very, very difficult to go back and to tease this all out. The book of Revelation, no doubt, was the most controversial book when the church fathers were considering which books were to be considered a part of the canon. The book of Revelation made it, and it made it for a different reason. It made it because the church fathers thought that it did present Jesus as divine, and that was good enough. So did the book of Revelation have Paul in mind? It's hard to say. If he had Paul in mind, as explicitly you suggest, the church fathers certainly would have rejected it. After all, those church fathers were convinced that Paul was the author of 14 letters in the New Testament. they believe that the book of Acts was written essentially to prop up Paul. So I hardly doubt that they viewed it that way as well. Anyways, the key part is that the mitzvahs of the Torah can never be adjusted, can never be changed. Torah's Hashem Temima, the Torah of God is perfect. Meshivas Nofesh, it alone restores the soul. Eidus Hashem Ne'emona, the testimony of God are trustworthy. Machimas Pesi, they make the foolish wise. So what people, I think, should be considering is going back to the original. Paul certainly tried to take the early Christian movement away from the Jewish people, and he did that quite successfully. He is no doubt the not just the most influential figure of Christianity and by far contributed the most literature to the New Testament. I mean, 13 books are ascribed to him, 13 out of 27. So that's a lot. But he is no doubt the person who really shaped Christianity, invented proto-Orthodoxy, and unfortunately brought avodah zarah, brought idolatry to the world. But I'm not convinced that the book of Revelation was thinking about him. Anyways, thank you for your question. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא ואת נעשה בחפצו כל